So on October 8th of 2025, during a White House roundtable discussion on Antifa held in the state dining room, Secretary Marco Rubio passed a handwritten note to President Donald Trump, which was captured in a close-up photograph by an Associated Press photographer. On an official White House letterhead featuring urgent scrawled handwriting that read, quote, "very close," followed by, quote, "we need you to approve a True Social post so you can announce deal first," end quote. The image was spread all over the place, but it shows it on the paper slightly crumpled at one corner, held up close to the camera mid formal setting. Now, this is in response to the peace talks that were happening between Hamas and Israel. When he was talking about announce deal first, he's talking about the deal between Israel and Hamas, which is a pretty big deal. And if you haven't seen anything about it, you should check it out. By far, the most important and biggest news taking place on planet Earth right now is the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. And I'm pretty sure all of you are probably interested in a lot of the details, so I'm going to get right into it. As of October 9th of 2025, Israel and Hamas have reached an agreement on the first phase of the U.S.-brokered ceasefire aimed at ending the ongoing conflict in Gaza, which began with Hamas's October 7th attack on 2023. Now, the deal, which was announced on October 8th by U.S. President Donald Trump, follows direct talks between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and focuses primarily on the immediate release of all Israeli hostages that are held in Gaza at this time in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli custody. Now, this breakthrough comes after nearly 2 years of intermittent negotiations mediated by the U.S., Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey amid the mounting international pressure and ongoing military operations that would have resulted in over 67,000 deaths in Gaza, predominantly women and children, according to Gaza health authorities. Although you could probably get your information on that from a bunch of different sources, and I'm sure that different sources are going to have different numbers and different information on that, because obviously what Israeli sources are going to say are going to be different than what the Gaza health authorities are going to say. And a lot of people say that the Gaza health authorities are influenced by Hamas in some way, but again, you can make that decision for yourself regardless. Anyway, the agreement is described as informal in nature with no formal signed document required, though some reports indicate a ceremonial signing is scheduled for noon local time on Thursday, October 9th in Egypt's Sharm el-Sheikh. Now, so far, President Trump has hailed it as a, quote, powerful diplomatic success, crediting regional cooperation and suggesting that it could pave the way for broader Middle East peace, including potential movement from Iran as well. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu called it a, quote, national and moral victory, end quote, emphasizing that it advances Israeli war objectives while securing hostage returns. And when we're talking about hostages, we're talking about all living ones and deceased ones, so that the families of the deceased ones can receive the remains and give them a proper burial as well. So now, Hamas officials expressed gratitude to the mediators and confirmed their approval of the first phase, though they cautioned Palestinians to remain vigilant until official implementation. The deal doesn't fully resolve a lot of the core issues like Hamas's long-term disarmament, Gaza's governance, or a permanent end to hostilities, which have been deferred to potential future phases. Now, one of the key things about this is, like I said, it doesn't lead to long-term disarmament. Hamas did not agree to lay down their arms at all. And that's a huge deal, because that means they're still going to be receiving weapons potentially from Iran, because like Iran's going to continue to smuggle weapons in there because they continue to use Hamas as a proxy terror group. So they're going to continue to do that. Now, you got to keep in mind, Hamas is different than Palestinians. Two different things. The Palestinian people are the folks that live in Gaza, the civilians. Hamas is the state-sponsored terrorist organization that Iran sponsors to destabilize the region. So it's going to be tough to really definitively say like how much of an impact this is going to have on the relationship between the Palestinian people and Israel if Hamas does not agree to long-term disarmament. I don't know if they've even agreed to short-term disarmament. Hopefully this will start happening in potential future phases, but at least they can get a ceasefire going for now and get something started. Now, some of the experts that have been watching this thing and like digging into the details, note that success is going to depend on U.S. enforcement and also President Trump's personal commitment. Yeah, so the agreement, like I said, was finalized overnight on October 8th through 9th of 2025, which rendering a public signing ceremony unnecessary or informal at most. While some Israeli media reported a low-key signing event at noon local time on October 9th in Sharm el-Sheikh, multiple sources confirmed the core deal was sealed privately without fanfare, allowing for rapid implementation. Now, this approach avoids politicizing the process amid domestic sensitivities in Israel over prisoner releases. Now, teams from both sides are actively working to compile and approve the final list of Palestinian prisoners for release, with Hamas having already submitted proposed names based on agreed criteria. Likely a lot of those that are still serving life sentences or detained since October of 2023. There are some estimates floating around that suggest that between 1,950 or 2,000 prisoners will be freed, including approximately 250 that are serving life sentences for terrorism-related convictions and up to 1,700 others that are being held on lesser charges. Notably, Israel has stipulated that participants in the October 7th of 2023 attack will not be included in the exchange. That means if they have any prisoners that are Hamas prisoners or Palestinian prisoners that were participants in the attacks on October 7th of 2023, Israel is not going to include them in the exchange. Now, the lists for both hostages and prisoners have been exchanged, but final vetting is still ongoing to ensure compliance between both sides. Now, phase one during this 72-hour period, it's going to be release of all the hostages, including both living and deceased, like I said. Now, there are estimates that there are at least 48 total hostages still in Gaza, including 20 that people believe are alive and 26 to 28 that folks speculate are deceased. They will be released in a single tranche over a 72-hour window starting immediately after Israel government approval, which is expected imminently, potentially as early as today, October 9th. Now, this does not mean releases must wait until the end of the 72 hours, and handovers could begin as soon as the period starts, with living hostages prioritized for swift return, possibly as early as Monday, October 13th. Now, the Israeli Defense Force is going to oversee the retrieval process, and releases are expected to occur without any ceremonies to expedite logistics and expedite the entire process. Hamas has also confirmed that it holds the 20 living captives and will locate and hand over remains it controls. Though Israeli sources expressed concern that some bodies may be unrecoverable due to unknown locations, which that is kind of crazy to think about. Like, imagine if Hamas doesn't even know where the locations of these corpses are because of so many conflicting factors, because like bombing, like moving people around all the time for 2 years. And I also can't imagine what it's been like being a prisoner for 2 full years. Like, that can't even begin to wrap my head around that. There's no amount of SEER school that can prepare you for that stuff, let alone if there's just civilians, you know? Now, to address potential gaps in this, there's a multinational task force that's being put together comprising of Israel, Egypt, Qatar, and the U.S., with possible Turkish involvement as well, that's going to be established to search for and recover the bodies of any hostages or deceased individuals that Hamas cannot or does not return. This mechanism is going to ensure accountability and aims to prevent disputes from derailing the deal, which are some things that caused previous deals to get derailed and prior exchanges where not all the remains were located, because this is a very sensitive thing. So like, if they don't have a bunch of people working together to get this thing through the finish line, it could get derailed and then just escalate back to where we were at before. Now, some more broader terms for the timeline, like some of the phases of the deal for phase one are going to be, like I said, focusing on hostage prisoner swaps, a temporary ceasefire, partial IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and humanitarian aid resumption. It begins upon Israeli government and security cabinet approval, which Netanyahu's cabinet's scheduled to convene at 5 p.m. local time on October 9th for the briefing of this. And then the ceasefire is set to take effect at noon local time on October 9th, with the 72-hour hostage window following shortly after. Some of the future phases have not been fully detailed, but they would involve further Israeli Defense Force withdrawals, potentially up to 70% of Gaza, steps towards Hamas demilitarization, and then full construction of Gaza funded by regional partners, and negotiations on Palestinian governance, possibly a technocratic committee excluding Hamas. President Trump referred to this as a, quote, council of peace, and he would lead to oversee this, but sticking points like complete Hamas disarmament remain unresolved. I'm going to be honest with you. If Hamas doesn't get disarmed, that's going to make this whole process much harder, And so far, Hamas has been very resistant to the idea of completely disarming. So we'll see. The hostage and prisoner exchange mechanics are going to be a little complicated because you're going to have Hamas and their allies, including the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, that hold the captives, mostly from the October 7th attack, plus one IDF soldier held since 2014, which is crazy to think of. Since 2014, I don't know if he's alive or deceased. Releases are going to occur via coordinated handovers, likely at Rafah crossing or similar points with international verification. And then Israel's release will be phased alongside hostage returns, starting with high-profile figures. The exchange ratio is not fixed, but leans heavily towards Palestinian prisoners, approximately 40 to 50 to 1 based on prior deals. And then amnesty or immunity for senior Hamas leaders abroad is rumored, but unconfirmed in official terms. Now, as far as military and security aspects of this deal, there's going to be an immediate, complete halt to hostilities upon activation, with Israel withdrawing forces within 24 hours to a pre-agreed yellow line or buffer zone, retaining control over about 53% of Gaza initially, including key security corridors. Full withdrawal from populated areas would follow the final hostage release, but Israel insists on maintaining operational freedom to prevent rearmament. Now, the Israeli Defense Forces also prepared defenses and warned against civilian approaches to forward positions. Some other initial steps include restrictions on Hamas military activity backed by international security guarantees from the U.S. and mediators, although there's no full disarmament plan in phase one, but Benjamin Netanyahu emphasized eventual military or diplomatic enforcement. Another person that's been very vocal about the Israeli-Gaza situation is U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, and he was stressing that Hamas must be, quote, completely disarmed and excluded from governance, end quote. Humanitarian and reconstruction efforts, there's supposed to be full resuming of aid into Gaza, with the UN scaling up deliveries of food, medicine, and supplies. And then there's supposed to be unfettered, unlimited humanitarian access and reconstruction funding from other countries in the area, potentially Gulf states that would pledge themselves to assist in the aid and recovery. Now, the Palestinians have been advised to not return to northern Gaza until official clearance, likely because of ongoing military occupation and operations in the area. Now, so far, the reactions online have been obviously different for different folks. The Israeli side has expressed, jubilation and happiness at the hostages and families forum in Tel Aviv, with families thanking President Trump directly. Opposition leaders like Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz praised the deal but urged swift execution. And there's still a lot of concerns that persist over prisoner releases fueling future attacks. Now, as far as the Palestinian side and the Hamas side, they have cautious optimism in Gaza with warnings against Israeli violations. Hamas views it as a step toward ending the genocide, is what they're calling it, quote, genocide. That being said, it's going to be tough. If Hamas is involved in any way in the government, I'm telling you right now, my personal opinion, it's not going to stay. I know that that's part of the peace talks, is that Hamas cannot be involved in the governance of Gaza at all. And it's going to have to be an independent authority, but I hope that they can find a way to get this to work, but it seems that Hamas is just they're not willing to disarm. And I don't know if they're going to be willing to allow the Palestinians to govern themselves. They might be willing to pretend that they're governing themselves, but then still control stuff. But we'll have to see how things happen in the future. So we'll see. I hope that it stays, because obviously less death and less violence is good for everybody, and I think that there's been enough suffering on all sides at this point. So peace would be good. Now, President Trump plans to visit Israel possibly on Sunday. He's also going to address folks, like a Knesset address. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres welcomed the, quote, glimmer of hope. Critics like Max Boot warn of fragility without phase 2 progress. There's going to be a lot of challenges with this thing as well, because there's still ongoing bombardments that underscore risks. The deal's permanence hinges on compliance as well. From both sides. Both sides are going to have to adhere to compliance with the deals that they're informally agreeing upon. But this is definitely a rare de-escalation of the whole thing, but its durability remains uncertain amid a very deep level of mistrust between not only the Palestinians, but also Hamas and the Israelis. And neither side trust each other at all. And I can see why both sides would feel that way. So I think something that's going to really it's going to be really pivotal for this to be long lasting. Hamas is going to have to lay down their weapons and their arms, which I don't think, because Iran wants like the complete utter destruction of Israel. I don't think that Iran's going to allow Hamas to become de-armed or disarmed completely. And again, really another big factor is going to be that Hamas have nothing to do with the government of the Palestinian people, like the local governance. And the only way this is going to have like long lasting impacts is if the Palestinian people are governing themselves and Hamas like takes a step back. But really at the end of the day, I don't see how they're going to be able to keep this going unless Hamas like lays down all their arms. So, I mean, that's just my personal opinion, because like they're always going to continue to ramp stuff up. And if they ever ramp anything up, then the Israelis are immediately going to ramp stuff up against them too. So I don't know. Complicated situation again, but hopefully they'll be able to have some peace and get some aid in there. And, you know, what happened last time, like in like the earlier 2000s, like when they were starting to get some peace and security back in the region, Hamas just started funneling all the resources that were coming into the region to them. And then they slowly started building stuff up and started launching rockets and doing all this stuff again. And a lot of the aid was going to them. So we'll have to wait and see. This is a very tenuous thing at best. So I hope that it works. I hope that the Palestinian people can, you know, have some peace restored and some semblance of normalcy and get back to like living decent lives and like having peace and not getting bombarded. And then I also hope that the Israelis are not getting rocketed, you know, and that they're able to like live with relative feelings of safety, both sides, you know, but we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, a lot of it's going to have to do with whether or not both sides are willing to comply with what their plan was for their prospective roles in the peace treaty. So I guess we'll see. I don't know what it is, but I keep seeing videos surface of the Democratic gubernatorial candidate for California, Katie Porter, who is like having meltdowns in videos. I just keep seeing more videos of it. This particular video was filmed in July of 2021 when she was at the time a U.S. representative, Katie Porter from California, basically cussing out one of her staffers in the background because one of her staffers crossed into the camera view. Check this out.
And other problems, and the state could lose. Get out of my shot.
I wanted to tell you that that's actually incorrect. It's not that it's electric vehicles. It's that if we don't meet the commitments under the Paris Climate Accord.
Okay, it does. Okay, you also were in my shot before that. Stay out of my shot. Okay.
Oh my God, bro. Yeah. Anyway, you saw the staffer just like accidentally walked into the camera shot, and then Porter yelled at her to get out of my effing shot. Apparently the footage was released, but they edited out that part of the webinar because it was recently published and obtained by Politico on October 8th of 2025. Now this video came out just a few hours after another clip from a recent CBS Sacramento interview that went completely viral because Porter grew visibly agitated with reporter Julie Watts over a question about appealing to Trump voters in California's 2026 gubernatorial race. And in that exchange, Porter laughed off the premise, calling the line of questioning, quote, unnecessarily argumentative, and then threatened to end the interview by removing her microphone, saying, quote, I don't want to keep doing this. Nope, not like this. I'm not.
So I don't want to keep doing this. I'm going to call it. Okay. Thank you.
You're not going to do the interview with us?
Nope, not like this. I'm not. Not with 7 follow-ups to every single question you ask.
Every other candidate has answered our follow-ups.
I don't care. I want to have a pleasant, positive conversation in which you ask me about every issue on this list. And if every question you're going to make up a follow-up question, then we're never going to get there.
Ms.
And
Porter,
we're just going to circle around.
I am an investigative
I have never
reporter.
had to do this before, ever.
You've never had to have a conversation with
to end an
reporter?
interview.
Now, these back-to-back clips getting released only amplified the long-standing rumors and whispers about Porter having a specific type of temperament that you can determine for yourself, including past allegations of staff mistreatment during her time in Congress, such as high turnover and reports of an abrasive management style. Now, her gubernatorial campaign, where she remains a polling frontrunner thanks to her national profile, strong small dollar fundraising and endorsements from groups like Emily's List, have downplayed the videos as irrelevant distractions. I'm sure. The way people treat other human beings, I don't think that's irrelevant. I think that's pretty relevant, actually, because like if you're treating your staff like that, how do you think that she's going to be treating her constituents who she doesn't even have to work with? You know, I think it's pretty relevant, personally. Specifically, spokesperson Peter Opitz stated, quote, Californians are hungry for a governor who they can trust can fight for them against Trump. They know from her work taking on powerful interests in Washington that Katie is never going to be shy about calling out BS. And that's why every poll shows Katie firmly in the lead, end quote. Now, Porter herself has not responded or addressed directly the clips of the staffers, but have emphasized her commitment to the race at a recent event, saying, quote, this is a big field. I'm proud to be at the front of it, and I'm going to work hard to keep it that way, end quote. Nevertheless, these episodes of losing your temper and not having control of your emotions have been pretty, quote, disastrous for her campaign. According to multiple strategists across the aisle, resurfacing vulnerabilities tied to her, quote, undisciplined, thin-skinned, and abrasive persona, end quote. Now, some of her rivals are also taking advantage of the opportunity to seize the moment for this as well. You know, specifically like the former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. And he aired ads featuring the CBS clip while Betty Yee urged Porter to drop out, saying, quote, women in politics are held to higher standards and Katie Porter has clearly failed the test, end quote. Even some Democrats like consultant Marisol Samayoa criticized the displayed temperament as unleader-like. Some other public reactions on X specifically, which you can imagine how unhinged those are probably. Some users are labeling her, quote, unhinged, or, quote, batshit crazy, or unfit for office generally, often trying to or tie it to like broader critiques of her as performative or overly aggressive. Now, of course, conservative outlets are amplifying everything too because they're just going to take this and run with it if they can. But despite the uproar and like the way that she's treated her staffers and like how she's conducted interviews, she still leads in early polls for now. But the videos have definitely injected a little bit of friction, I would say, into a race that's still pretty fluid among California's redistricting battles. We'll see what happens. So in early October 2025, approximately 200 members of the Texas National Guard have been deployed to the Chicago area in order to provide security for federal immigration enforcement operations, specifically to protect the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents and federal property. Now, this deployment, which was ordered by President Donald Trump, is part of a broader initiative to send National Guard troops to Democratic-led cities amid heightened immigration enforcement efforts and related protests. The troops arrived on October 7th through 8th, 2025, and it began active duties on October 8th, staging at an Army Reserve Training Center in Elwood, Illinois, which is about 55 miles southwest of downtown Chicago, which is a pretty rare interstate use of National Guard for domestic federal protection, and has sparked significant controversy over federal to state authorities. The deployment stems from escalating tensions over immigration enforcement in Chicago, which has been considered a sanctuary city pretty widely, and they've definitely resisted federal deportation efforts. The local law enforcement has been instructed by not only the elected offices that are local to Chicago, but also Illinois, the local police chief. They've been ordered not to work with or support any of the efforts with ICE and to stay away from that area because they believe that it's just inflaming the situation. While a lot of people from outside the state have condemned that for them, for the local law enforcement not supporting, immigration enforcement authorities or border enforcement authorities that are up there. So there's been a lot of conflict internally in that respect. Now, President Trump has repeatedly described Chicago as a, quote, war zone due to what he calls rampant crime and inadequate local cooperation with federal agents, though crime statistics in the city have shown mixed trends. You can figure that out. I would do a little bit of research and figure it out for yourself. Recent ICE operations in Chicago have targeted members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, including high-profile raids early in October involving helicopters and arrests of dozens of suspected gang members. Protests against these raids have turned violent in some cases, with reports of clashes near federal facilities, prompting the need for additional security, which is also one of the reasons why they've called for help from local police, the police force. But like I said, the local police force were told specifically and explicitly, do not go to that area, stay away from there. Now, The Texas troops are assisting around 300 Illinois National Guard members that are already mobilized for the mission, and their role is going to be limited to safeguarding ICE personnel and property, not direct law enforcement or arrests, which is kind of what I anticipated seeing from them anyway. This is not the first time the Texas National Guard has been used for immigration-related duties, because they've been a staple in operations along the U.S.-Mexico border as well under Governor Greg Abbott. However, sending them to an out-of-state location, especially like a blue state like Illinois, where Chicago is located, it kind of represents an escalation in President Trump's strategy to counter perceived, quote, soft on crime policies in urban Democratic strongholds. Now, like, to give you a rough idea of the timeline for this thing, early in October 2025, ICE kind of ramped up their raids in Chicago, arresting dozens of gang members and things like that, like Trenderagua. A bunch of protests erupted, with some turning confrontational near federal buildings. And then October 7th of 2025, Texas National Guard troops were spotted arriving at Elwood Army Reserve Facility, and ABC News captured some of the video of the convoy. October 8th of 2025, troops began protecting federal sites. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker filed a lawsuit challenging the deployment as an unlawful federal overreach. And then as of October 9th of 2025, a federal court hearing on the lawsuit is pending, with troops remaining active despite objections. President Trump publicly called for the jailing of Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor Pritzker over their resistance. Now, the move has divided opinions sharply along partisan lines, with Trump administration officials, including the White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, framing it as an essential for public safety amid a, quote, Democrat shutdown, end quote, and rising threats to agents. Pro-Trump voices on X and other social media platforms have celebrated as a bold stand against sanctuary policies, with posts like, quote, federal immigration agents now have backup, end quote, which has gained traction among the administration's supporters. Now, a lot of the local Democratic opposition has stemmed from Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson calling the deployment, quote, illegal, unconstitutional, and dangerous, end quote, accusing it of stoking fear for political gain. And then Governor Pritzker has labeled the troops, quote, political props and, quote, pawns, arguing that it violates the state's sovereignty in the Posse Comitatus Act, which limits military involvement in domestic policing. But again, the National Guard troops aren't being used for police efforts. They're just being used to protect federal personnel and federal facilities. Now, Illinois lawmakers have echoed those concerns, with some warning of potential civil unrest resulting after these National Guard troops show up. Public and media sentiment has varied widely. There's been an enthusiastic support from the right, and it seems to be that most folks on the left are just not fans of it, we'll say. Now, some legal experts have noted that while the president can federalize National Guard units for certain emergencies, some of the critics are saying that this doesn't extend to overriding law enforcement at the local level without invoking the Insurrection Act, which the president has not done yet. Now, this deployment kind of fits into the pattern that's been set over the past, I would say the past year, using military resources for domestic issues, similar to the past mobilizations in Portland and Memphis and Los Angeles. Now, this is happening all while the government is still shut down. There's lots of flight delays because air traffic controllers have been furloughed or just are not showing up to work because they're working long hours and they're not getting paid. But as of now, there's been no major incidents involving the Guard that's been reported, but the situation remains pretty fluid and there's still ongoing protests, and definitely going to be a court battle ahead. All right, that's it for the video today, guys. I appreciate you watching until now. If you've watched the video up till this point, that means that you're actually helping support the channel, believe it or not, because retention rates do cause YouTube to push this stuff in the algorithm a little bit more. So I appreciate you watching until now. If you want to help the channel in other ways, you can like this video, you can leave a comment in the comment section below, or you can share this video with your friends. So please let us know what you thought about this video in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.